In this episode, we are walking through what exam day actually feels like for the CySA Plus so that the experience is less mysterious and a lot less stressful before you even sit down. Many beginners study the content seriously but still lose confidence because they have only prepared for the topics, not for the conditions under which they will need to think about those topics. That difference matters more than people expect, because a nervous mind often turns familiar material into something that suddenly feels distant or confusing. When you know what kinds of questions you are likely to see, how the clock affects your decision-making, and what the testing experience is supposed to look like, you give yourself a better chance to think clearly. The goal is not to make exam day feel casual, because it is still a high-stakes moment, but to make it feel familiar enough that your attention stays on analysis instead of drifting toward uncertainty and self-doubt. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our Course Companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. At a basic level, the current CompTIA Cybersecurity Analyst, CySA+, exam gives you up to 85 questions, uses a mix of multiple choice and performance-based questions, PBQs, allows 165 minutes for the exam itself, and uses a passing score of 750 on a scale from 100 to 900. Those facts are useful, but they only become meaningful when you translate them into expectations. Up to 85 means you should not expect a tiny exam that lets you linger on every item for as long as you want. A mix of question formats means your brain has to shift between selecting answers and working through more interactive problem-solving tasks. A 165-minute time limit means the exam is long enough to reward composure, but not so long that poor pacing can be ignored. The score scale also reminds you that this is not about perfection. It is about demonstrating enough sound judgment across the exam to show that you can think like a developing analyst under realistic conditions. One helpful mindset shift is to stop imagining that every question is trying to trick you and instead assume that most questions are trying to see how well you can reason in context. That does not mean the exam is easy, because some items will still feel close, ambiguous, or frustrating. It does mean that your task is usually to choose the best answer in the situation presented, not the most dramatic answer or the answer that sounds the most technical. Many beginners get into trouble because they overread the scenario and begin inventing extra facts that the question never gave them. Others rush too quickly and miss one small detail that changes the best answer entirely. On exam day, the strongest habit is disciplined reading. Treat each question like a compact decision-making exercise. Notice what is being asked, what role you are playing in the scenario, what clue matters most, and whether the exam is asking for a first step, a best explanation, a strongest control, or a likely cause. The PBQs deserve special attention because they often create the most anxiety before the exam even begins. CompTIA describes them as real-world problem-solving items delivered through simulations or virtual environments, which means they are designed to feel more interactive than ordinary selected response questions. CompTIA also says that most PBQs appear near the beginning of the CySA Plus exam, and that while you are working on those items you may not see a clock, which can make them feel longer and more disorienting than they really are if you are not prepared for that experience. On top of that, CompTIA's PBQ guidance explains that some simulation-style PBQs can be skipped and revisited later, while virtual PBQs may require you to complete them when encountered, so reading the on-screen instructions carefully matters before you decide on your approach. The main lesson is simple. Interactive items are part of the normal exam rhythm, not a sign that something unusual is happening, so meet them with method rather than panic. Time management starts becoming real the moment the exam begins, but it should not become an obsession that steals your concentration. Some learners make the mistake of turning the whole experience into a running math problem, constantly dividing the remaining minutes by the remaining questions and frightening themselves every few minutes. That usually makes performance worse rather than better. A calmer approach is to remember that not all questions take equal time and not all points feel equally difficult while you are sitting there. Some items will be straightforward, some will require careful elimination, and some will feel stubborn no matter how much time you give them. Your goal is not to spend identical effort on each question. Your goal is to keep moving, preserve enough time for the full exam, and avoid letting one confusing item consume the energy that should have been spread across the rest of the test. A strong pacing habit is to separate difficult from impossible in the moment. A difficult question is one where you can narrow the options, identify relevant clues, and make a reasoned choice after a little thought. An impossible question, at least for the moment, is one where you are mentally stuck, rereading the same words, and gaining no new insight from additional time. On exam day, those two situations need different treatment. A difficult question deserves focus. An impossible question usually deserves a temporary move forward so that it does not become a trap. This is especially important for beginners, because anxiety often disguises itself as persistence. You tell yourself you are being thorough, but really you are burning time while your confidence drains away. Good exam discipline means giving serious effort where it is useful and refusing to be trapped where it is not. Before the content even matters, the logistics of exam day can either help you settle in or create needless stress. If you are testing at a Pearson VUE center, CompTIA recommends arriving at least 15 minutes early so you have time for sign-in procedures without immediately feeling rushed. You will need acceptable identification, and CompTIA says the first and last name you use to register must match the name on the required IDs you present on exam day. At the center, you should also expect a photo during check-in and restrictions on personal items, which means phones, bags, notes, smartwatches, and similar belongings are not going into the testing room with you. None of that is meant to intimidate you. It is simply part of a controlled testing environment, and it feels much less disruptive when you treat it as normal rather than as a personal obstacle that appeared only to make your morning harder. If you choose to test online through OnVUE, the stress points are a little different, but the basic lesson is the same. Remove uncertainty before the exam starts. CompTIA says you should run the system test ahead of time so your machine works properly with the online proctoring software, and it also recommends shutting down non-essential applications before launch. For the testing space itself, CompTIA explains that your workspace should be clear of books and writing objects. Extra monitors and computers should be unplugged, and visible writing on walls or whiteboards should be cleared away. You also need your identification and your phone available for check-in, although the phone must be moved away when the exam begins. If technical problems happen during the exam, CompTIA says you can communicate with the proctor about technical issues even though they cannot help with exam content. That means the best online exam strategy is not hopeful improvisation. It is preparation that reduces the number of things that can go wrong at the worst possible time. Once the exam begins, one of the most useful things you can do is refuse to treat the opening minutes as proof of how the rest of the test will go. This matters because many candidates see an awkward PBQ or a strangely worded first question and instantly decide the exam is going badly. That conclusion is almost never helpful and often not even accurate. Early difficulty does not predict final outcome. It only predicts that the exam started with a question you did not love. A better mental response is to reset after every item. Read what is in front of you. Do the best work you can with the information given, and then move on without carrying emotional residue from one question into the next. The exam is long enough that emotional discipline matters. A candidate who can recover quickly from one ugly question often outperforms a candidate who knew a little more content but allowed frustration to spread across the next 10 items. Another major exam day skill is careful interpretation of what kind of answer the question wants. CySA plus questions often live in the space between pure recall and pure intuition, which means wording matters a great deal. One question may be asking for the most likely explanation, while another is asking for the best first action, and another may be looking for the control that most directly addresses a given risk. Those are not the same mental tasks. If you answer them as though they are interchangeable, you create mistakes that feel unfair only because the reading was too loose. On exam day, discipline yourself to notice the verbs and the framing. Is the exam asking you to identify, prioritize, mitigate, respond, escalate, or report? When you pay attention to that level of detail, the answer choices often become less intimidating because you are no longer trying to choose the most impressive option. You are choosing the option that fits the actual question being asked. It also helps to accept that some answer choices are written to be attractive for the wrong reason. They may contain a real cybersecurity term, a strong-sounding control, or a dramatic action that seems decisive. Beginners are especially vulnerable to these options because technical language can create false confidence. A complicated answer is not automatically a better answer, and a more aggressive action is not automatically the correct next step. CySA Plus often rewards proportion and context. That means a quieter, more measured answer may be better if it fits the scenario more precisely. The smartest approach is to eliminate options that solve the wrong problem, happen at the wrong time, or assume facts not in evidence. Once you reduce the field that way, the correct answer is often easier to recognize. This is one reason exam day calm matters so much. Calm candidates compare answers. Anxious candidates chase whichever one looks strongest at first glance. Physical and mental preparation on the day itself also deserves respect, because fatigue and distraction can make a well-prepared learner perform like an unprepared one. You do not need a dramatic routine, but you do need to arrive in a condition where your brain can stay steady for a long exam. That means getting adequate sleep, eating in a way that supports concentration rather than discomfort, and handling practical things like water, caffeine, and a restroom visit before the exam begins. None of that is glamorous, but it matters. Long cybersecurity exams are not only knowledge tests, they are also concentration tests. If your attention is already fragmenting because you are hungry, jittery, exhausted, or preoccupied with being late, the exam becomes harder than it needed to be. Good preparation, therefore, includes treating your body as part of the testing environment, because clear thinking does not happen in a vacuum. When you are inside an interactive item, remember that you are not being graded on elegance or style. You are being graded on whether you can interpret the problem and work toward a functional answer. CompTIA's PBQ guidance notes that there can be more than one way to reach a correct solution, and that partial credit may be available on some of these items, which should reduce the pressure to achieve some imaginary flawless performance. This is especially important for beginners who freeze as soon as they feel imperfect. An interactive question does not require perfection to be worth working through. It requires useful progress. That means reading the prompt carefully, understanding what the task is actually asking you to do, and making reasonable decisions based on the information you have. If a simulation includes controls, logs, placements, or investigative choices, focus on solving the actual problem presented instead of worrying about whether a different real-world tool might do the same thing another way. As the exam comes to an end, many candidates experience a sudden burst of doubt, especially if they marked several questions or remember a handful that felt terrible. That reaction is normal, but it is not reliable evidence of failure. Difficult questions are memorable, while the many questions you handled reasonably well often fade into the background. If you have remaining time, use it wisely by revisiting items where renewed attention could genuinely help. Do not use it to randomly overturn answers that were originally chosen with sound reasoning. After submission, CompTIA says candidates receive their results immediately, and at a test center the score report is printed for you. Whatever the outcome, the moment after the exam is not the time to rewrite your whole identity based on how you feel. Feelings after a long test are noisy. The score report is the clearer signal. By the end of this discussion, the most important thing to remember is that exam day goes better when you treat it as a professional event rather than a dramatic trial of worth. You should expect a long but manageable test, a mix of question types, and a pace that rewards steady judgment more than speed for its own sake. You should expect some moments of uncertainty, because that is part of the design of an analyst-centered exam. But you should also expect that uncertainty can be managed with clear reading, sensible pacing, and emotional control. The best tips are often the least flashy ones. Prepare your logistics, understand the format, stay calm when the opening questions feel awkward, do not donate your time to one stubborn item, and trust careful reasoning more than exam day panic. When you walk in knowing what the experience is supposed to feel like, the exam becomes less of a looming mystery and more of a challenge you are ready to meet.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.